Madam Chair, and thank you very much for holding today's legislative hearing and including my bipartisan legislation, the Safeguarding Therapeutics Act, which I drafted with my friend Congressman Guthrie. Counterfeit drugs and medical devices pose a significant health risk to the American public, which can lead to serious patient harm or even death. Just last November, the DEA reported that 27% of the counterfeit pills it had seized contained potentially lethal doses of fentanyl. Since 2008, the FDA has frequently participated in an international initiative known as Operation Pangea to prevent the sale of counterfeit healthcare products. The Safeguarding Therapeutics Act provides the FDA with another tool to protect Americans from counterfeit medical products. Specifically, this bipartisan legislation provides the FDA with the authority to destroy counterfeit medical devices. Chairwoman Eshoo, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to submit into the record a letter of support for H.R. 5663 from the Healthcare Supply Chain Association.
So ordered.
Thank you. Mr. Kaiser, thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights on protecting the healthcare supply chain from unscrupulous actors. I know much earlier in the testimony you mentioned to it. In your written testimony, you share a recent example of how a counterfeit version of J&J's medical device known as Surgicel, which is critical to controlling bleeding during and after surgery, nearly ended up in patient care. Mr. Kaiser, how did this product end up in the supply chain, and what steps can policymakers take to educate healthcare providers and patients about counterfeit medical products?
Representative Engel, first of all, thank you very much for your sponsorship of this bill. It's very important. Going back to the example with Surgicel, the counterfeit Surgicel was manufactured in India, went through a distributor in the Middle East based in Dubai, and eventually landed in 3 distributors in Florida. So per our investigation, these distributors contact hospitals offering lower cost Johnson & Johnson products, and they took the bait. So it was through an unauthorized gray market distributor is how they acquired that.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for helping us to expose it. Dr. Muzio, let me say this. I want to talk about drug shortages, which is certainly a priority for the New York hospitals. Drug shortages can hamper patient care in that they delay, obviously, medical procedures or lead to the substitution of recommended treatments with alternative therapies. And these shortages have increased in recent years, putting an unnecessary burden on safety net hospitals in my home state of New York. In September, I led a bipartisan letter with Congressman Guthrie, signed by over 90 House members, to the FDA, which prompted the agency to release a report on approaches to reduce drug shortages. And I also want to thank Chairman Pallone for supporting us on this issue. His bill, the National Centers for Excellence in Continuous Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Act, which I have co-sponsored, would expand federal support for a promising technology that could help address drug shortages. So Dr. Muzio, could you describe how continuous manufacturing is more expeditious in responding to drug shortages than traditional batch manufacturing?
Yes, thank you very much, Congressman, for your co-sponsorship of the bill. So when you have to develop a product or a process using batch manufacturing, typically you have to make a full batch of product many times over to obtain the information needed to figure out what are the right parameters to make the product. You make each of those batches under different conditions, and from that, you determine how to make the product going forward. So each time in batch, you end up making a full batch. Or you make a small-scale batch, and then you have to do scale-up studies to be able to then implement the process at the full scale. This takes many weeks, sometimes months. In continuous manufacturing, you are feeding your ingredients to a system that turns those ingredients into finished products in a manner of minutes. And if you want to explore many conditions, you modify your settings, and every 10 or 15 minutes, you have a full new experiment. So the entire large set of experiments that you need to do to find the right way to make the product or the process takes a day or two. Even if you want to repeat your studies, all you end up needing is a few weeks at the most. So the intrinsic nature of continuous processes is much faster. One more thing that is important, as you do those experiments, you are collecting information about what the process is doing every second. So you have much more information about how those experiments tell you how to implement the process. And as a result, you can implement a new process and find the right conditions much more quickly.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to everybody on the panel. It's been really very enlightening and interesting. And thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Engel, and I know you waited a long time to be to speak, and appreciate the good words that you've both your questions and the good words about the excellent witnesses. Pleasure to recognize the gentleman and my pal from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I see my colleague from Illinois has been also waiting patiently, Ms.
He's
Schakowsky.
waving on, though.
Okay, I'm going to yield back my time. Appreciate you all being here.
Okay, moving right along. We recognize the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky, who is waving on to the subcommittee.